Thank you, Tuba. Next, we have Firuzeh Mahmoudi, who is the co-founder and executive director of United4Iran, which is a global solidarity network for human rights in Iran. Her work focuses on network and movement building, collaborative leadership, and nonprofit management. She earned a master's degrees in both environmental science and public affairs, and received her bachelor's in economics from UC-Berkeley. Prior to United4Iran, she worked for the UN Development Program, various international NGOs, focusing on health issues in the global south. She has worked directly in more than 10 countries with partners in another 30 countries. She is on the board of various NGOs, including All Islam Kids. Please welcome Mrs. Firuzeh Mahmoudi.
Can you hear me in the back? Hi. Thank you for the introduction. This is a very appropriate building to be in on Earth Day with all the beautiful wood and trees inside. I wanted to first tell you a little bit about United4Iran. As it was mentioned, it was started in July 2009 by me and by Dr. Hadi Bayami, who runs the International Campaign for Human Rights in Iran. United4Iran is a global solidarity network. Our vision is a solidarity movement, to be part of a solidarity movement similar to that of South Africa and the one that had in the US for the civil rights movement, something of that sort, and we're building towards that. We work towards improving the human rights conditions inside Iran, both by improving the conditions for prisoners of conscience and by improving systematic violations throughout the Iranian society. And we do this in 3 ways. We build a global network any which way we can. So that includes building the online community, as well as our communities in cities and campuses around the world. We have contacts and members in 90 cities around the world that we work with. Part of building that community is bringing non-Iranians into the movement. How many of you here are non-Iranians? And this is good for a typical Iranian event. We're working towards improving that. So there are 3 pillars within the United4Iran work, and we're working, and all 3 of them build off of each other and enhance each other. So one was the network building that I just mentioned. The second one is public awareness and letting people know the stories, as Rashid just did. And the third is advocacy, working with governments and international and national governments and other agencies to change policies and to encourage them to continue the human rights dialogue with Iran and encourage them. You might know that in the US, 10 people who are the biggest violators of human rights are now banned from, or sanctioned. They're human rights sanctions. So they can't enter the US and they cannot have banks. So these are examples of good policies that we can advocate for. Now, I haven't moved on to my PowerPoint. So now, moving on to the talk about the students and the academic situation inside Iran. A little background. What percentage, a question for you, what percentage of people in Iran are under the age of 30, roughly?
60.
70, that's pretty much right. So vast majority of Iranians are young, they're students, they're active, they don't see religious, ethnic, or geographic boundaries. They have a different vision of Iran, and they're a huge part of society and politically quite active. They are the forefront of many movements. This includes 1953, 1979, June of 2009 as well. Also in their campuses, they're quite active. So campus life for students includes social and political groups. They're active about dorm improvements, about academic rights. They have newspaper student unions, so that's quite vibrant. And many of the movement actually start in the campuses. An important day to note is Iran Student Day. Who knows when it is and how it came about? That's international, so we're talking National Iran Day. It's 7th of December. Firuzeh Mahmoudi. And when did that start? Do we know? I'm sure somebody knows. Okay, so 1953, Nixon was coming to Iran. There were protests. 3 students were killed. Iranian National Student Day was born, and every year since then, this day has been continued. So the situation in Iran has changed drastically over the years, but this day has continued. And this still symbolizes and stands for the struggle for human rights, for academic rights. And all of these movements and activities by students are at a price. There's repression, there's discrimination, there's deprivation of education, and there's systematic rights abuses. So a quick history, a recent history of Iranian students and their struggle. So July 1999 stands out. Does anyone know what happened then? So that's when a reformist newspaper was closed, and there was about a week of riots and clash down, and basically the police came into the dorms and killed 3 students, and it was horrific. And 2002 and 2003 were met with similar protests and crackdowns. 2002, because one of the lecturers, reformist lecturers, was sentenced to death, and in 2003 because some of the universities were privatized. And in 2005, the first Ahmadinejad's presidential election, the first one, the biggest student group in the country advocated for boycotting. So this has continued and actually has grown quite a bit since the 2009 election, as we know. Now I'm going to spend a couple minutes talking about a couple of the students. How many of you know of Majid Tabakari? So, incredibly brave man. He's 24. On the same student day that I mentioned in 2009, he did a speech at his university, Amir Kabir, and shortly after, he was arrested for 8.5 years. So he will not be out on this things change until his early 30s. In addition, he's getting 5-year ban on political activity and leaving the country. Next student, Baha'i Hidayat, who knows her? Same crowd. So she just turned 30, incredibly brave individual. She's a woman rights activist. So she was one of the founders of the 1 million signature campaign. She's also a avid student activist. She was arrested because of a lecture, a video that she made, a 10-minute video, and you can Google it. I encourage all of you to see it. And European Student Union, which is incredibly active and political and social, gave her an award, a Student Peace Award, and she made this video for them. And after that, she was arrested for 9.5 years. And she was recently married, so instead of being with her family, finishing her education, she's spending most of her 30s not raising her kids, but being behind prison walls. So some details about the conditions inside prisons, recent conditions for the students. Currently, there are at least 74 students that are in prison that we know of. There are another 10 of these students that have reported being tortured, raped, or forced to give false confessions. The conditions in prisons are horrific. They are malnourished. There's no medical need when there's no medical support when it's needed. They're sick. They're overcrowded, and much more. And students are more severely treated than others, and I believe that's because they're the Achilles heels of the regime. They're most of the country. They have their vision of Iran is completely different, and they're fighting for it. and it's just a matter of time before they win their country back. And the regime knows it, and they try to fight back by severely punishing them. So within the universities, things are also changing quite a bit, unfortunately. So one example is the boundary between government, academia, and the administration at the schools are becoming more and more blurry. So they're becoming, in essence, one, and the government's controlling all of it. Their eyes and ears are everywhere. So that's one change. And also, academia is being basically peeled away. So all social sciences and humanities are being replaced by studies that are about religious studies or Islamically appropriate. How many of you are studying social sciences or humanities here? It's quite a bit of you. So this is being done away with. And there's complete lack of accountability within the entire system for all that's happening. So you have the judges who are sentencing people to these horrific sentences of decades long, if not more, and no one's holding them accountable. You have police who are opening gun on protesters, including students. You have prison guards who are torturing and raping students, and no one's asking questions. And you have basically militia thugs who are going to dorms and beating up and killing the students. And none of this is being accounted for, talked about, or addressed in any way. And the discrimination and the situation is actually becoming more systemized, which is not a good thing. Specifically, this is all targeted, as has been discussed, at religious minorities, ethnic minorities, in particular the Baha'i, and at anyone who's politically active, part of a news group, a student group, newspaper, any of those things. So what they're doing is they're depriving them of school, of graduate school. They're banning them from resources such as subsidized dorm rooms and student loans and so forth. They're holding suspension and expulsion over their heads. They're punishing them with it, and they're threatening them to keep them quiet. And it doesn't just stop there with the students. The professors and the academia who stand up to this, who voice their concerns and want to teach humanities, who want to see the students have their basic academic rights, are also being targeted. They're forced to leave their jobs early and retire. They're demoted, they're attacked, and so forth. And I'll address sex discrimination in another slide, and that's prevalent as well. So initially, the admission process had to do with one rigorous test that is called concours, that students would study months, if not years for, and I'm sure many people here can attest to that test, being rigorous. So that was basically to determine your fate. You studied as hard as you could, and that would dictate what city and what major and what university your school would be in. So they have found ways, the government, to justify including cultural and moral ethics into the decision-making process. So there is this group part of the government that I can't remember the name of. It's called Supreme Cultural Revolution Council. And they've come up with two regulations. One is moral and one cultural. And based on those, now other issues, cultural and moral, are part of the decision-making process. And the Ministry of Information and the revolutionary courts make these decisions and basically oversee the process. And some of the people who are admitted are conditionally admitted. Specifically, I would like to spend a couple minutes talking about the STAR system. So basically, the STAR system targets the groups that are active that I mentioned, the religious minorities as well as the politically active. And for these groups, it determines if they're